if you're watching this, do me a quick favor before we get started. Hit the like button so more people see it. Subscribe if you want more true stories from the road. And if you've ever driven through Colorado in winter, especially near Leadville, leave a comment and tell me how it felt. Cold? Lonely? Maybe a little too quiet? I'm asking because what I'm about to tell you isn't something I ever planned to share. Not with my coworkers. Not with my friends. And definitely not with strangers on the internet. But talking to a camera feels safer than talking to someone face to face. It gives me distance. It helps me pretend none of this actually happened, even though deep down, I know it did. My name is Marcus. I'm a Colorado State Patrol officer, and for the last few years, I've been stationed near Leadville. If you've never been there, it's one of the coldest places in the entire country. Not just chilly, bone-deep cold, the kind that gets inside your clothes and seems to settle in your chest. The kind of cold that makes your breath feel metallic. Leadville sits high in the mountains and the air is thin. Everything feels sharper there. Sound travels weird. Shadows stretch too long. And winter? Winter lasts almost half the year. Every shift I've worked, I patrol long stretches of Highway 91 and Highway 24. Those roads slice through forests where the trees crowd the edges like they're trying to lean in and listen. They cut along cliffs that drop into old mining valleys and past frozen marshes, where fog hangs low even at noon. At night, the snow reflects the moonlight so strongly, almost looks like daylight. But the silence reminds you it isn't. You don't hear birds or animals, just the wind moving between branches and across the ice. I used to like the quiet. I used to believe the mountains were peaceful. But now I understand why some locals refuse to drive after dark. They say there's something out there, something older than the towns, older than the mines, older than the roads we built. Some call it the Night Wanderer. Others don't give it a name at all. They just shake their heads and tell tourists to stay near the lights. I thought it was just folklore. Leadville has a lot of stories. Mining accidents from the 1800s, blizzards that trap whole families, and entire camps swallowed by avalanches. People died out there, and the mountains don't forget. You hear those things enough times, and they become background noise. Something you joke about with new recruits. Something to fill empty air when the radio's quiet. But the thing about stories is, sometimes they start because someone saw something real. It was early January when everything changed. A little after 2 a.m., I was running a routine patrol on Highway 91. The sky was clouded, hiding the moon. Snow fell light and slow, just enough to blur the edges of my headlights. I'd driven that road hundreds of times. I knew every curve, every mile marker, every guardrail. There's a section where the highway bends around the base of a mountain and connects to an old service road. That road has been closed for years. Too dangerous in winter, too unstable in summer. No one uses it except the occasional snowmobile. And even then, they're not supposed to. I was passing that area when something caught my eye. Two long, dark lines across a patch of untouched snow. I tapped my brakes, leaned forward, and squinted. Tire tracks. Fresh ones. That didn't make sense. We'd had 2 days of heavy snowfall. No plows had gone up that way, and the road was blocked by a metal gate with chain around it. If someone had driven through, the snow would have filled the tracks by now. But these lines looked clean, sharp-edged, like they'd been left minutes earlier. I pulled over, my tires crunching loudly in the otherwise silent night. The wind pushed against my cruiser, making a low hum. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out, and walked toward the gate. The air bit into my face. My breath fogged up instantly and drifted sideways with the wind. The tracks looked like they came from a small pickup. Maybe older, judging by the width. They cut straight through the snow and led past a lock gate like the metal barrier wasn't even there. I checked the chain. Still intact. Still locked. Someone would have needed to lift the chain entirely. Push the gate aside, drive through, then resecure everything without leaving a single disturbed clump of snow. That wasn't possible. Not without leaving footprints. Not without leaving some kind of mark. But the tracks were the only thing there. No prints. No broken snow. Nothing. I told myself maybe a snowmobile rode across before the storm ended, but I've lived here long enough to know what snowmobile tracks look like. These weren't that. My flashlight beam bounced off the nearby trees, making them seem taller and darker. The woods looked endless from where I stood, thick, watching. I should have gotten back in the car right then. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. I stepped closer to the gate to get a clearer look. I crouched down, brushing my glove across one of the tracks. The snow was loose and powdery. No ice crust. No melting. Whoever, or whatever, made those tracks couldn't have been there long. And that's when I heard it. Marcus. A whisper. Soft. Right behind me. I jerked upright and spun around, shining the flashlight across the snow and the trees. Nothing was there. Just wind and swirling flakes of white. My breath came out fast, and I felt it catch in my throat. I wasn't scared yet. Not really. But something was off. The voice hadn't sounded like a stranger. It had sounded familiar somehow. Like someone I knew well, but couldn't place in the moment. Marcus. There was again, this time farther away, drifting from deeper in the trees. I raised my other hand to the radio clipped to my shoulder. Before I could press the button, the forest went dead silent. Not quieter, completely silent. The kind of silence you feel more than hear. The snow even seemed to pause midair. That silence didn't feel natural. I stood there for maybe 20 seconds, flashlight pointed between the pines. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, and slowly, a cold, logical part of my brain started whispering explanations. Wind can sound like voices sometimes. Snowfall can distort sound. I'd been working long shifts. Maybe I didn't sleep enough. Maybe I was hearing things because the mind does strange stuff in isolation. That explanation wasn't comforting, but it was better than the alternative. I forced myself to turn away from the woods and walk back to my cruiser. Each step sounded too loud. My boots crunched through the snow like I was breaking bones underfoot. The whole time, I felt the prickling sensation of eyes on me. Watching. Waiting. I climbed into the driver's seat, shut the door, and exhaled. I told myself the same thing I told rookies when they got jumpy. It's the mountains. The cold messes with your senses. Don't let the dark convince you it's alive. The engine hummed softly as I put the car in drive. My headlights washed over the empty road. Nothing but falling snow and a long stretch of asphalt ahead. But the feeling didn't leave. As I began pulling away, I glanced up at the rearview mirror. A single drop of condensation had formed in the corner of the windshield. Strange. The heater was on full blast. I reached up to wipe it away, but before my hand touched the glass, my dash cam flickered. Just for a second. Cam flashed again, this time showing a grainy image. A figure stepping onto the road behind me. I whipped my head around and stared out the back window. Nothing. Just snow falling through darkness. I looked at the dash cam screen again. The figure was still there, standing, facing the cruiser. Tall, still, just inside the edge of the headlights. The image shook slightly like the device couldn't focus. My heart climbed into my throat. Not possible. I whispered. The camera glitched again. Static, then darkness. Then the normal feed returned. An empty road coated in white. The figure was gone. I sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel harder than I meant to. My breath felt tight. My pulse hammered in my neck. I kept telling myself I must have seen a shadow, or maybe the dash cam picked up a distorted reflection. Cameras glitch in the cold all the time. Electronics hate. Leadville winters. Everyone knows that. But the figure, the height, the way it stood still, something about it didn't sit right. I forced myself to keep driving, trying to shake the feeling crawling its way up my spine. The tires hummed on the road, steady and calm, like nothing unusual had happened. Each mile marker I passed felt like a small relief, a small escape. But no matter how far I drove, the feeling stayed with me, the sense that something had watched me. Something had stepped onto that road, even though I never saw it outside the camera. Something that wasn't supposed to be out there. And as I headed back toward the main highway, one thought repeated in my mind, over and over, louder than the wind and louder than the engine. If that wasn't the wind calling my name, then what was it? I didn't have an answer that night, and even if I did, I don't think I would have believed it. All I knew was that whatever I heard, whatever I saw on the dash cam, it wasn't the last time. It was only the beginning. Because the very next night, something even stranger happened, and that led to everything that came after. I went back on shift the next night pretending that nothing was bothering me, but the truth sat heavy in my chest the whole drive. I kept seeing that dashcam image in my mind, how the figure stepped onto the road like it belonged there, like it had been waiting. I didn't tell anyone at the station. What would I even say? Hey, my camera captured a ghostly shape that I never saw in real life. They'd laugh, or worse, they'd ask if I needed time off. I wasn't ready for either reaction, so I kept it to myself and tried to pretend I was fine. But the road didn't feel the same anymore. It felt colder. Even though the temperature hadn't changed much, the snow looked deeper, heavier somehow, like it carried weight beyond ice and water, and the darkness seemed to press closer to the edges of my headlights. I found myself checking my mirrors more than usual. Every time I did, I half expected to see something standing in the glare behind me. About an hour into the shift, dispatch called. Their voice crackled over the radio. Unit 47, we have a possible stalled vehicle near Turquoise Lake. No contact from the owner. Please check it out. Turquoise Lake. Of course. If there was one place around here that had a reputation for weirdness, it was that lake. People went missing there long before I joined the patrol. Hikers, campers, fishermen. Some were found days later, confused and frostbitten, swearing they'd only been lost for a few hours. Others were never found at all. Locals always said the lake had moods. When the ice formed early, they said it was impatient. When it cracked late in the season, they said it was angry. I didn't believe in any of that, but even I had to admit the area felt off. I'm en route. I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The drive there was quiet. Too quiet. Snow drifted across the road like thin sheets of smoke. The forest on either side stood dark and motionless, as if waiting for something. By the time I reached the turnoff of the lake, that uneasy pressure in my chest had grown stronger. I told myself it was just leftover nerves from last night. Residual stress. Nothing that meant anything. The stalled car sat on the shoulder a few hundred yards up the access road. A dark blue sedan, older model, its hazard lights blinking softly through the snowfall. The surrounding snow looked untouched except for a single trail of footprints leading away from the driver's side door. I parked behind it, leaving my headlights on for visibility. The wind carried a low whistle across the frozen water nearby. I stepped out, crunching through the snow, and called out, "State Patrol, anyone here?" No answer. I approached the car. The driver's door was wide open. The cabin light was still on. The engine was warm. Not running, but recently shut off. Someone had been here minutes earlier. I checked the interior. A purse sat in the passenger seat. A phone charger dangled from the console. A half-empty bottle of iced tea stood in the cup holder. Everything looked normal, except for the fact that the owner wasn't here. The footprints led toward the lake. I followed them with my flashlight, scanning each impression carefully. They were small, maybe a woman's boot prints, and spaced close together like she had been walking slowly. The snow around them was undisturbed. No signs of running or dragging. No animal tracks. Just one clear line heading straight for the ice. "Hello," I called again. My voice sounded too loud in the cold air. The wind shifted, bringing a faint echo back toward me. At least, I thought it was an echo. But it didn't sound quite right. It sounded softer, like someone trying to answer but not strong enough to shout. I walked farther, following the trail until it reached the edge of the lake. The surface was frozen over, a flat sheet of pale white reflecting the beam of my flashlight. The footprints continued onto the ice in a straight line. I hesitated, scanning the frozen surface. No cracks, no holes, no signs of anyone falling through, just the prints. I stepped onto the ice carefully, listening for the telltale groan of shifting pressure. Nothing. I walked farther, following the line across maybe 20 feet of frozen lake. And then they stopped, just like that. One step, two step, vanish. The last print was crisp and deep, and then nothing. No return tracks. No scattered snow. No sign that the person had jumped, fallen, crawled, or turned around. It was like they'd simply disappeared into thin air. I crouched beside the last print, staring at it. The wind blew a thin veil of snow across the surface, but the print was still clear. I tried to think through every possible explanation. Maybe the snow had drifted and covered the next prints. Maybe the person walked backward to confuse anyone tracking them. Maybe they trudged sideways in a way that didn't leave clear impressions. But none of that explained a complete absence of any disturbance around the area. The snow was unbroken in every direction. A chill ran up my spine. The same feeling I'd had the night before when I thought I heard my name. The same sense that someone or something was nearby, watching. I straightened up, trying to shake it off, and keyed my radio. Dispatch! The vehicle is empty. I've got footprints leading onto frozen lake. They stop about 20 feet out. I need additional units and possibly SAR. There was a long pause. Then dispatch answered, "Copy Unit 47. But if the footprints stop, maybe the subject got a ride before you arrived." I frowned. The engine was warm. The driver's door was open. Maybe someone picked them up quickly. It happens. I looked around at the desolate, empty lake. No other tire tracks. No other footprints. No sign of anyone or anything that could have picked someone up. "No," I said quietly. "It doesn't." But dispatch didn't seem concerned. They told me to file a preliminary report and continue patrol unless I found something else. I lingered another few minutes, scanning the lake for any movement. There was none. The snow kept falling. The wind stayed steady, and the footprints remained impossible. Eventually, I returned to the cruiser and shut the door, grateful for the heater. But the warmth didn't chase away the cold in my chest. Something was wrong here. Something was wrong with this whole week. As I prepared to pull away, a truck pulled up beside me. An old Ranger vehicle, faded green, with dents along the side that looked older than I was. The driver rolled down his window. It was Eli, one of the rangers who managed the forest areas around Leadville. I'd seen him a few times before, always quiet, always watchful, always looking like he knew something the rest of us didn't. "You found the car?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Driver's missing. Footprints go onto the lake and stop." He nodded slowly, not surprised, not confused, just resigned. "Seen that before," he muttered. I stared. "What does that mean?" Eli looked out toward the lake, his eyes narrowing. "If you're starting to see things out here," he said quietly, "it means it sees you back." A chill crawled across my skin. What sees me? But he didn't answer. He just rolled his window up and drove off, like he'd said more than he should have. I continued my patrol, but the rest of the night felt wrong. The road seemed emptier. The darkness felt thicker. Even the snow sounded strange beneath my tires, like it was muffled by something deeper than ice. Around 3 a.m, while parked near a turnout, I heard a sudden, sharp sound. 3 knocks on the passenger side window. Not taps, knocks, hard enough to vibrate the glass. I jumped, grabbing my flashlight and shining it out into the night. No one was there. No footprints. No shadows. Nothing. My breath came fast. I told myself it had to be falling ice or shifting snow. But deep down, I knew that sound. Someone had knocked. Someone with intention. And a few minutes later, my radio crackled with a voice I knew too well. A voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. Marcus, my father's voice. He'd been dead since I was 17. The whisper faded as quickly as it came, leaving only static. I sat frozen in the dark, the radio hissing softly, and I realized something terrifying. Whatever was happening out here, it wasn't done with me, not even close. And soon I would learn why. I barely slept after that night at Turquoise Lake. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those 3 knocks on the window again. Every time I drifted off, the sound of my father's voice hissed through the static of my dreams, whispering my name the same way it had over the radio. I knew I should tell someone. I knew I should report the missing driver, the impossible footprints, the strange sounds. But not a fear tightened inside me every time I tried. I didn't want to sound unstable. And more than that, I didn't want someone to take me off the mountain roads. I wasn't sure why, but the idea of leaving my post made my stomach twist. So the next day, instead of taking time off like a sane person, I went to the records room. It was a cramped space tucked behind the main office, filled with metal cabinets, dusty binders, and decades of patrol logs that smelled like old paper and cold air. I told myself I was just being thorough, just looking for patterns or explanations to help me understand what I'd seen. But deep down, I think I already knew the truth. I was looking for someone who'd gone through something like this before. Because whatever was happening to me, it didn't feel new. I started with the newer records. The last 10 years. Nothing jumped out at first. Mostly the same kind of winter calls I dealt with every year. Spin-outs, lost hikers, minor accidents. But as I dug deeper, flipping through pages until the tips of my fingers were gray with dust, I started noticing small notes, brief warnings, little sentences tucked between routine entries. False call, arrived and no one was there. Heard distress cry from Frozen Creek. No signs found. Driver reported shadow beside road. No pedestrians in area. Nothing detailed. Nothing long, but enough to make my stomach tighten. I kept searching, pulling out logs from 2011, 2003, 1994. It didn't matter how far back I went. The vague entries kept appearing. Not every winter, but often enough to form a pattern. Different officers, different handwriting, different decades, but the same strange phrases. False calls, vanishing drivers, shadows on the ice. One log from 2003 stood out. The handwriting was jittery and rushed. The officer wrote, "Saw someone on frozen lake. Approached, but figure dissolved in snowfall. Radio interference increasing." Another note from 1994. Responded to scream near mile marker 71. Snow undisturbed. Heard whisper using my name. My chest tightened. I sat back in the metal chair, listening to the hum of the overhead fluorescent light. The room felt smaller all of a sudden, the air heavier. I kept flipping pages, my eyes scanning for anything else. Then I found it. A single sheet tucked between two thick binders. A log from an officer named Daniel Cross. Dated January 11th, 1994. The location, Turquoise Lake. My heart thudded in my chest as I read his entry. Saw footprints leading onto lake. Subject missing. Followed prints. They ended suddenly. Radio picked up voice resembling deceased relative. We'll investigate further. That was the last entry. No follow-up. No explanation. And on the next page, clipped to the binder, was a red notice. Officer Daniel Cross, missing in field, January 12, 1994. The same lake, the same footprints, the same voice over the radio. I felt the room tilt slightly. My breath turned shallow. I told myself it was just coincidence, just a repeating set of events on dangerous terrain. But deep down, something hollow opened inside me. Someone had walked this road before. Someone hadn't returned. I took the logs to my desk, reading through the entries again and again, trying to convince myself I was imagining the similarities, trying to ignore the cold feeling creeping up my neck. Later that evening, when my shift was about to start, I found Eli waiting near his old Ranger truck outside the station. He leaned against the door, arms crossed, staring at the snow falling under the yellow glow of the streetlights. "You've been reading the logs," he said without looking at me. I didn't ask how he knew. At this point, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Did you know the officer who went missing in 94? I asked. Eli nodded slowly. Dan Cross. Good man. Smart. Careful. Didn't scare easy. He lifted his gaze to me. He started seeing things too. What kind of things? Eli's face tightened. Cold echoes. The term fell heavy in the air. Cold echoes. I repeated. Things the storms leave behind, he said softly. Voices that shouldn't exist. Shapes that don't belong. They pull at you, call to you, make you think someone needs help. He tapped his temple. They're not ghosts. They're pieces. Leftovers. Memories the mountains keep. I frowned. Mountains don't have memories, Eli. He gave a humorless smile. You've been out here long enough to know better. I wanted to argue, but the word stuck. I thought of the footprints on the lake. The 3 knocks on my window. My father's voice whispering through static. I thought of the dashcam glitch, showing a figure that wasn't there in real life. Why me? I whispered without meaning to. Eli's eyes narrowed. If you're starting to notice them, it means they've noticed you. That's how it starts. My stomach turned. And how does it end? He didn't answer. Instead, he opened his truck door. Just be careful, Marcus. The storms are getting heavier. I stood in the cold long after he drove away, trying to calm the unease twisting inside me. I didn't want to believe any of it. I didn't want to accept that something was calling to me from the mountains. But deep down, I couldn't deny the truth anymore. Something had changed. That night, during my patrol, the weirdness grew stronger. It started with the footsteps. I stopped near a turnout to check a patch of road where snow had drifted over the asphalt. It was routine. Something I'd done 100 times. The wind was calm. The forest quiet. I walked along the shoulder with my flashlight and notebook, jotting down slippery areas and lift points. Then I heard it. Crunch. Slow and heavy. Like someone walking behind me. I froze. The sound stopped too. I turned around, sweeping my flashlight across the road. Nothing. No shadows. No movement. No footprints but my own. I forced myself to take a few more steps. Crunch. Closer this time. I spun again, the beam of my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. State Patrol. Who's there? Only silence answered. The hair on my arm stood on end. I reached for my radio, thumb hovering over the button, but something stopped me. A gut feeling that reporting it would make it real, make it spread. Like it was safer if I kept quiet, at least for now. I took out my phone instead. Hit record. Lifted the microphone toward the dark woods. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, crunch, crunch, slow, rhythmic, coming closer. My breath caught. I lowered the phone to check the screen. The audio line was flat. Nothing. Not a single sound. The footsteps continued until they felt inches away. I spun around so fast, I nearly slipped on the snow. And just like that, they stopped. I stood alone in the silent dark, heart pounding, trying to convince myself I hadn't lost my mind. I didn't go far from the cruiser after that. The rest of the shift felt like walking through a nightmare, one where every shadow stretched too long, every gust of wind whispered something indistinct. Every reflection in the glass seemed to follow my movements. By the time I drove back to the station, my nerves were shot, but I still couldn't bring myself to tell anyone. I didn't want them to look at me the way they must have looked at Officer Crossback in 1994. When I got home, I decided to check something I'd never bothered with before, my father's old box of belongings. My mother had kept it tucked in the attic for years after he died. Inside were papers, photos, letters, and a few of his old patrol items from when he worked in Colorado before requesting a transfer. I had never gone through it completely, but tonight I did. Near the bottom of the box, I found a folded map. The edges were worn. The paper smelled like dust and old wood. And in the corner, written in my father's handwriting, were the words, District 7, Winter Patrol 1994. My breath stalled. He had patrolled the same district, the same winter, the same year Officer Cross went missing. Why hadn't he told me? I opened the map fully. Notes covered several areas of the mountain roads. Circles around Turquoise Lake. Underlines near the turnout, where I'd heard footsteps. A scribbled phrase along Highway 91. The mountains remember. I stared at the words until they started to blur. And then my radio, sitting on the kitchen table where I'd tossed it, crackled to life, not with static, not with a dispatch call, but with a whisper so familiar it felt like someone pressing a hand to the back of my neck. Hey, kiddo? My childhood nickname. No one at the station knew it. My father's voice. I stumbled backward, knocking into the counter, staring at the radio like it was a living thing. The voice whispered again, soft and broken, "Come back to the road." Then the line went dead. I stood there in the dark kitchen, shaking, staring at a silent radio, wondering what was real and what the mountains were trying to tell me. Whatever it was, I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't finished with me. Not yet. And the deeper I went, the colder it grew. I didn't even remember falling asleep that night. One moment I was standing in the kitchen, staring at my father's silent radio, feeling the echo of his voice in my bones. The next, I woke up to a sharp knocking on my window, the real one, in my bedroom. Not the phantom knocks I'd been hearing in the patrol car. My heart jumped into my throat. I sat upright, blinking hard, but it was just the wind. The storm had begun. Snow slammed against the glass in thick waves, rattling the frame like handfuls of gravel. The sky outside was a flat, swirling white. Dawn hadn't broken yet, but the storm made everything glow faintly with reflected light. A blizzard warning had been issued the night before, but I'd hoped it wouldn't be as bad as the forecast said. It was worse. I barely had time to get dressed when dispatch called. "Unit 47, the operator said, her voice strained by static. "We've got a possible crash past Fremont Pass. Report came from a trucker before he lost connection. You're the closest. Proceed with caution." I stared at my boots for a long second, not wanting to step back into that world of snow and whispers. But duty is duty. And maybe part of me still hoped that if I kept working, kept moving, kept pretending to be normal, whatever was happening would fade the way nightmares fade in daylight. "Copy," I answered. The drive up the mountain was worse than anything I'd seen that season. Snow whipped across the road faster than my wipers could clear it. The wind roared like something alive, throwing white walls in front of the cruiser every few seconds. Visibility dropped to only a few feet, sometimes less. My headlights seemed to shine into nothing but shifting flakes. The storm felt angry. By the time I reached the coordinates dispatch gave me, my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I pulled over near a broken section of guardrail and turned on every light I had. High beams, flashers, spotlight. The blizzard swallowed them instantly, like light meant nothing inside that storm. I stepped out of the cruiser, bracing myself against the wind. The cold hit me like a punch to the chest. The breath leaving my body felt thick, like it instantly froze into crystals. Snow coated my uniform faster than I could brush it off. This stretch of road was deserted. No homes, no trailheads, nothing but forest on one side and a drop-off on the other. The perfect place for an accident. The perfect place for someone to disappear. I walked toward the damaged guardrail, expecting to see fresh skid marks, broken glass, an overturned vehicle, anything to suggest a recent crash. But all I found was old debris frozen into the snow, pieces of blue plastic, rusty metal, a crumpled caution cone half buried like a fossil. All of it looked like it had been there for years. The wind blasted my ears. Snow stuck to my eyelashes. I keyed my radio. "Dispatch! I'm not seeing a recent crash. Only older debris. Possibly the trucker saw shadows or misjudged the storm." The radio crackled and hissed, then went silent. I tried again. "Dispatch, do you copy?" Only static answered. And then, cutting through the storm, I heard it. A voice. A woman's voice. Faint at first, almost lost in the howl of the wind. "Help! Help!" I froze, listening hard. The sound came from somewhere down the slope, toward the tree line. I stepped closer to the edge, shining my flashlight into the swirling white. The beam barely penetrated the storm. "Hello," I called, raising my voice against the wind. "This is State Patrol. Call out again." "Over here," the woman cried. Closer this time. Clearer. Full of pain. My heart dropped. Someone was alive out there. Someone needed help. Without thinking, I stepped past the guardrail, boots sinking into deep, powdery snow. The wind shoved against me. But I pushed forward, following the voice down the slope. "Keep calling." I shouted. The cry came again, but now it sounded farther to the left. I turned, trudging in that direction. Another call, this time behind me. I spun around, confused. Snow stung my face, my hands, the exposed skin under my collar. The storm muffled everything, but that voice slid through it like a knife. Every time I thought I was getting closer, it shifted, like it was moving or being moved. A shiver crawled up my spine, not from cold, but from something deeper, something instinctive, something older than logic. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Help me," the voice sobbed again. This time it was right beside me. I jumped backward so fast I slipped, landing on the snow. My flashlight snapped sideways, the beam slicing across the storm. And that's when I felt it. Something walked beside me, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could hear its steps, slow, heavy crunches in the snow, perfectly spaced like a long stride. The sound came from my right, matching my breathing, settling into a steady rhythm. I couldn't see anything. Nothing moved in the beam of my flashlight, but the footsteps kept circling me, closing in. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I scrambled to my feet, shining the light wildly in every direction. My breath came fast, frost in the air. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "Who's there?" I yelled. "Show yourself." The storm swallowed my voice. Crunch, crunch. The footsteps came closer. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then steadied. A shape formed at the edge of the beam, a tall, thin outline standing just beyond the reach of the light. A human shape, almost, but as soon as I pointed the beam directly at it, the shape vanished into the snow, dissolving like mist. I stumbled backward, slipping again, nearly losing the flashlight. The shape reappeared the moment I aimed the light away from it, always at the edge of vision, always waiting, always just a few feet too far to see clearly. My fingers went numb around the flashlight. My lungs burned with cold air. Then the woman's voice screamed, loud, sharp, terrified. I bolted up the slope, running as best I could through the deep snow. The footsteps followed, their rhythm growing faster as I moved. My panic surged. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't look back. I reached the guardrail and threw myself over it, landing on the road hard enough to knock the wind out of me. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted to the cruiser, yanking the door open and climbing inside. I slammed it shut, and everything went quiet. Too quiet. My breath fogged the air inside the cruiser. I shivered, rubbing my hands together, and stopped when I saw the heater controls. They were on full blast, but the air blowing through the vents felt like it came from a freezer. Cold seeped into the car, crawling over the windows, frosting the edges of the glass. My radio crackled. Then a voice slipped through, not the woman's this time. My dad's. "Marcus." I froze. "Don't leave the road," he whispered. Not like I did. Static swallowed the rest. My throat tightened. "Dad." I whispered, even though I knew I wouldn't get an answer. Outside, the blizzard roared. Inside, my breath turned into visible mist. I don't know how long I sat there, minutes, maybe longer, before the storm finally began to ease. The wind slowed. The snow softened. The world became a pale, ghostly quiet. I forced myself to step out, needing to check the area one last time. The air felt lighter now, less suffocating. I walked around the cruiser, checking for damage. Everything looked fine, but then I saw the tire tracks. They didn't look right. Instead of a single set of tracks leading up the road, I saw two, side by side, running parallel. One set was mine. The other slightly offset, slightly longer. Like heavier tires had followed me the whole way, but I had driven in a straight line. Alone, I crouched down, touching the snow lightly. The second set looked just as fresh as mine. Not wind-blown, not older. Mirroring me, a cold chill crawled down my neck. Something had followed me up that road. Something had walked where I walked, driven where I drove, and the snow had captured the proof. I stood there silently, staring down that deserted stretch past Fremont Pass, feeling more alone and more watched than I had in my entire life. Something out there wasn't just calling to me anymore. It was getting closer, and soon I would learn exactly what it wanted. I barely slept after the whiteout, Even when I closed my eyes, I kept seeing the twin tire tracks running parallel to mine, like another cruiser had followed me step for step, matching me perfectly, even though I'd been alone on that road. When sleep finally came, it was shallow and restless. I kept dreaming of footsteps crunching behind me, always just out of sight, always in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat. By sunrise, I felt worse than exhausted. I felt hollow. The kind of hollow that comes from fear that doesn't fade when daylight hits. I needed answers. I needed something solid, something real, something that could anchor me to the world I thought I understood. So I went looking for Eli. I found him near the ranger station, checking chains on an old snowmobile. The morning was dim and pale, with clouds stacked over the mountains like layers of ash. The storm had blown itself out, leaving behind a quiet so sharp it felt unnatural. Even the birds seemed to be holding their breath. Eli glanced up as I approached, squinting to the faint sunlight. His face was worn and lined, but his eyes were alert. Too alert, like a man who had spent years waiting for something he hoped would never arrive. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said. "I didn't," I answered. "Can we talk?" He nodded once, slow and deliberate, then gestured toward the edge of the lot, where 2 wooden benches sat half buried in snow. We walked over and sat down, our boots sinking into the powder. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "It followed me last night, whatever it is. I heard it walking next to me, and the footprints, the voices, my voice trailed off. Saying out loud made my skin crawl again." Eli didn't flinch. "I told you, once you notice them, they notice you." I swallowed hard. "What are they, Eli? What's doing this?" He exhaled slowly, like he was tired of carrying a story that no one else wanted to hear. "You ever hear how this place got settled?" he asked. "I know some mining history." I said, "Enough to pass grade school." "That's not the real history," he muttered. "Not the part they put in books." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring across the empty lot toward the line of dark pines. "Back in the late 1800s, he began, miners dug too deep into the mountains. Not just tunnels, caverns. Places no one had ever seen before. Some men got trapped down there during collapses. Others froze trying to hike out in storms. Whole groups vanished when early blizzards rolled in without warning. Travelers went missing on these ridges long before highways were cut through." I listened silently. "But the strange part," he continued, "came after the storms. Men reported hearing their friends calling for help from tunnels that were sealed off. Search parties followed voices onto frozen lakes and found nothing. Some swore they saw figures walking through whiteouts. Figures wearing the clothes of people who had died weeks earlier. The mountains kept the dead close, but not as ghosts. Ghosts are people. What's out here isn't." A shiver crept through me despite the daylight. Eli turned to look at me, his eyes narrowing. They called them cold echoes. He'd said the term before, but hearing the explanation made it feel heavier. "What are they exactly?" I asked. "Spirits? Copies? Something else." "Something else," he said firmly. "Something the mountains made from all the loneliness and all the cold this place has soaked up. Memories that learn how to walk on their own. They feed on the lost. They mimic voices so you'll follow. They show you shapes so you'll stray. They want you away from the road, away from the lights, away from anything that keeps you tethered to the real world." I rubbed my hands together, feeling the fear settle deeper into my bones. "You sound like you've seen them before." Eli nodded, the motion slow and painful. "I have." He stared at the snow for a long moment before continuing. "It was about 20 years ago. My brother and I were out checking cabins after a big storm, the kind that cuts out power for days. He walked ahead of me to check one of the porches. Snow was coming down so thick, I could barely see him. Suddenly, I hear him calling my name from behind the cabin, clear as day. Eli's jaw tightened, but when I went around the corner, it wasn't him. My breath hitched. What was it? "A figure," he said softly, "wearing my brother's old red jacket, the one he died in years before. The thing looked like it wanted me to follow. It even tilted its head like he used to, I would have walked straight into the woods after it if something hadn't felt wrong. Something in my gut screamed no, so I turned back. He stared at me with haunted eyes. That was the last time I ignored the feeling, and the last time I saw an echo that close. My skin prickled. The wind picked up, brushing loose snow across our boots. And now it's after me, I said quietly. It knows you now, Eli said. It remembers you, and it won't stop. Those words landed like stones in my stomach. It wants what it always wants, he added. Someone to walk with it. I thought the voice on my radio. My father whispering, "Don't leave the road." My father, who had walked those same miles decades ago. My father, who never once told me he patrolled the same district where men and women vanish in storms. What happened to my dad? I asked, "Did he ever tell you anything?" Eli hesitated. He was a good man, a careful officer, but he saw things too, heard things. One night, he came into the station shaking, said someone was calling him off Highway 91. He was convinced he saw his own father standing in the road. After that, he transferred out. I felt something twist inside me, a knot of grief mixed with dread. He didn't leave because he wanted to, Eli said. He left because he was scared of what he'd become if he stayed. I looked down at the snow between my boots, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on my shoulders. The mountains, the voices, the footsteps, my father's whisper, the tire tracks mirroring mine. It was all connected. And somehow, it was all connected to me. You need to be careful, Eli said. They don't stop once they choose someone. And you need to keep track of your time. The echoes don't just mimic voices. They take pieces of you. That phrase hit me harder than the others. What do you mean, take pieces? You'll start losing moments, he said. Minutes, hours, whole stretches of road, places you visited but don't remember getting to. It starts small, but it grows, until you're walking the mountains without realizing you left your car. I felt cold again, blizzard cold, because it had already started. 2 nights earlier, I patrolled for 6 hours and remembered maybe 3. And last night, during the whiteout, I didn't remember the drive between 2 different mile markers. Miles of road gone from my memory, like someone had cut them out with a knife. I'm already losing time, I whispered. Eli's jaw clenched. Then you need to hold on to whatever pieces of yourself you can. Keep notes. Record everything. Don't trust gaps. Don't follow voices. And never, never step off the road. His warning echoed inside me long after he walked away. The next few nights on patrol were a blur. Snowstorms came and went. Wind pushed against my cruiser like invisible hands. My radio crackle was static even when dispatch was clear. And I started noticing the memory lapses Eli had warned me about. Tiny gaps at first. A minute missing here. A sharp turn I didn't remember making. A log entry written in handwriting that didn't feel like mine. Then bigger gaps. Miles missing from my odometer. My GPS showing locations I didn't remember driving through. A full hour gone after I responded to a call that supposedly never came. Every time it happened, a piece of fear chipped away inside me. And then there was the notebook. I kept a small spiral-bound pad in my jacket pocket, one I used for recording routine information. Except now I was checking it constantly, trying to see what I was forgetting. Most pages held normal notes, road conditions, times of calls, vehicle descriptions. But one night, during a quiet patrol near the edge of the forest, I opened a notebook to a page I didn't recognize. A drawing filled the entire space. Not a sketch, a detailed image. A tall, thin figure standing in the middle of Highway 91. Its arms hung at unnatural angles. Its legs looked too long. Its head tilted slightly, like it was watching something. And the perspective of the drawing. It showed the figure facing my patrol car, watching me, waiting. I stared at it for a long, cold minute, trying to remember when I drew it, trying to convince myself that I had drawn it. But I felt nothing. No spark of memory. No sense of ownership. The pencil marks didn't look like my strokes. The shading wasn't my style. And yet the drawing was inside my notebook, written with my pencil. I closed the notebook slowly, my hand trembling. Something was putting images into my mind, or into my hands, without me realizing. Something was getting closer. And deep down, I knew the mountains weren't done with me yet. The echoes were growing stronger, night by night, step by step. And the worst part? I wasn't sure how much of myself I had left to lose. I thought the drawing in my notebook would be the worst of it. That tall, thin figure standing in the middle of Highway 91, facing my patrol car, felt like a warning I didn't know how to read. After that night, I told myself I'd be careful. I'd stick to the main routes, ignore strange sounds, and treat everything I'd seen as stress and lack of sleep. The mountains didn't care. 2 nights later, the call came. I was sitting in my cruiser at a small turnout, engine idling, notebook on the passenger seat. Snow fell in slow, steady flakes, drifting across the narrow beam of my headlights. For once, the night felt calm. The storm clouds had cleared, and the sky above the black tree line was a dull, starless gray. I remember thinking that maybe things were finally easing up. My radio hissed, then cleared. Unit 47, we got a distress call. Dispatch said, young female, early 20s. She's stranded near an old miner road close to Quail Mountain. Says she's low on fuel and her phone battery's dying. You able to respond? Quail Mountain. Even the name made my stomach tighten. I'd only been near that area twice. Old mining scars cut the slopes and abandoned roads twisted into nowhere. Every time I passed the turnoff, I felt the same weird heaviness in my chest, like the mountain didn't want me there. But she was alone and it was my job. Copy, I said. Send coordinates. My GPS accepted the numbers and drew a thin purple line toward the turnoff. I pulled back onto the highway, tires humming over hard-packed snow. Pines and aspens rose on either side, their trunks like dark bars against the pale banks. The cruiser's heaters hummed. For a few minutes, it almost felt like any other winter night. Then, a few miles from the turnoff, my GPS froze. The little blue arrow that marked my cruiser stopped moving, even though the speedometer sat at 40. The map wouldn't scroll. A small spinning circle appeared in the corner, like the device was searching for something that wasn't there. Not tonight. I muttered, tapping the screen. Nothing changed. My radio crackled. For a moment I heard dispatch and another unit talking, but their voices slid over each other, backwards and warped. Then new words broke through. Help me, please. A woman's voice, thin and raw. Dispatch! Confirm last transmission. I said, my chest tightening. Was that the caller? Static surged, then shifted. I heard fragments of old calls. An officer from a week ago asking about road closures. A trucker reminding someone about chain laws. A laughing voice from a summer shift. They looped over and over, like the mountains were replaying memories back at me. Unit 47, you're breaking up. Dispatch finally said, distant and faint. Say again. En route to Quail Mountain. I said, radio's acting strange. GPS 2. Copy, she answered. Keep us updated. Her voice faded into noise again. The turnoff appeared ahead on my right, marked by a half-buried sign and a single bent reflector. I slowed and turned. The road narrowed at once, banks of snow rising on either side. My headlights washed over tree trunks and rock cuts, everything closing in. After a few minutes creeping up the slope, I saw a small silver sedan on the right shoulder, angled awkwardly as if it had slid a little before stopping. The hazard lights blinked a dull orange through the falling snow. There were no houses, no cabins, no other cars, just a sedan and the silent woods. I parked behind it, switched on my flashers, and stepped out into the cold. State Patrol. I called, walking toward the sedan. Ma'am, can you hear me? The only answer was wind moving through the branches. The driver's door was cracked open. Snow had dusted the seat and floor. I pulled it wider and looked inside. The cabin light flickered on. No one in the driver's seat. No one in the back. The dashboard was dark. A phone lay on the seat, screen glowing. A voicemail was playing on speaker. I'd picked it up, not ready for the noise that hit my ears. A woman screamed through the tiny speaker. Not a startled shout. A full, desperate scream, torn out of her like something had ripped open her chest. "Please, someone," she gasped. A loud thud followed, like the phone had dropped. Wind roared over the microphone, drowning out the rest. I thought I heard words tangled inside the noise. Not alone, maybe, and something that sounded too much like my name, but the message cut off with a harsh beep before I could be sure. The phone started replaying itself. Over and over. The same scream. The same cut-off plea. I ended the playback and slipped the phone into a bag. My heart was beating too fast now, my mouth dry. I checked the passenger side. Empty. No purse. No coat slung over the seat. No obvious sign of injury. Then I saw the footprints. They led away from the driver's side door, neat and narrow in the snow. Small boots, maybe a woman's, pointed toward the trees. I followed them with my flashlight. They hugged the edge of the road for a few yards, then turned sharply into the forest. Every part of me wanted to call for backup and wait. But I pictured her in the trees, hurt, getting colder by the second, and I imagined finding her frozen body in the morning, because I'd stayed where it was safe. "Ma'am!" I called again, louder this time. "It's the State Patrol. Call out if you hear me." No answer. I followed the tracks. The trees thickened around me as I left the road. Snow clung to branches, weighing them down so low I had to duck under a few. My flashlight beam cut a narrow tunnel through the dark. The world outside that tunnel felt far away, like it belonged to someone else. A few minutes in, I realized the forest had gone wrong. The wind faded to nothing. No branches creaked. No snow slid off limbs. There were no distant animal sounds. The silence was so complete it almost had weight. My breathing sounded too loud, even though I was trying not to breathe hard. "Hello," I said softly. My voice didn't echo. It just stopped a short distance ahead and dropped away. The footprints continued in front of me, as steady as ever. Then I saw her. She stood between two pines up ahead, a dark shape in my flashlight's range. A woman in a coat and jeans, long hair hanging over her shoulders. Her back was turned, her arms hanging limp at her sides. Relief and dread hit at the same time. "Ma'am," I called. "Don't move. I'm here to help. I'm coming to you, okay?" She didn't answer, didn't shift, didn't even tilt her head. I walked closer, heart pounding. "You're not alone," I said. "Just talk to me. Tell me if you're hurt." The beam of my flashlight slid up from her boots to her shoulders. Her outline rippled. At first, I thought it was the snow or the way the light cut through the air. But as I watched, her body seemed to stretch just slightly. Her legs looked a little too long. Her neck lengthened by an inch that felt wrong. The edges of her coat blurred, like someone had smudged the lines with a dirty thumb. My boot stopped moving. "Ma'am," I whispered. Her head began to turn toward me, but it didn't move like a normal body. It glided, too smooth, too slow, lagging behind the motion of her shoulders. I couldn't see her face clearly, just a pale oval, features smeared and unfinished. A sudden gust of wind slammed between us, carrying a spray of snow. For a heartbeat, my vision filled with white. When it cleared, she was gone. My light hit nothing but empty air and tree trunks. I looked down. The footprints stopped right where she had been standing. No more prints. No sign of fall or struggle. She had simply ended. My scalp prickled. I spun in a slow circle, flashlight shaking, searching for any movement. The woods stared back, blank and silent. My radio crackled, loud in the stillness. "Stay with me," a woman's voice whispered through the static. It wasn't dispatch. It was the same voice from a voicemail. I grabbed the radio, my fingers clumsy. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've got a missing driver near Quail Mountain. I need backup. Do you copy?" Static hissed like a long breath. Then, right by my ear, not from the radio at all, the same voice murmured, "Stay with me. You don't have to be alone out here." Warm breath brushed the side of my face. I jerked around. No one was there. No footprints. No broken branches. Just me and the empty snow. every instinct, I had screamed at once. Go. I turned and pushed my way back to the forest, following my own tracks. My legs felt heavy, like the snow was clinging to my boots. The silence pressed hard against my back, as if something walked just behind me, matching my pace without making a sound. Don't go, the woman's voice whispered. This time it came from my left. Then another voice rose under it. Low, familiar. Kiddo. My father. I didn't look. If I looked, I knew I'd follow. I kept my eyes locked on the faint path ahead, the grooves of my own steps leading back toward a world with roads and rules and headlights. At last, I saw the glow of my cruiser through the trees. The red and blue flashers turned the snow into pulsing color. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I stumbled out of the woods and onto the road, lungs burning, knees shaking. I headed straight for the driver's door. A figure stepped into the headlights. I froze. He stood in the center of the beam, a dark outline against the spinning color. Tall, broad shoulders, the shape of a uniform. The tilt of his head was so familiar my chest ached. My father's silhouette. He faced me, hands at his sides. Snow swirled through him like he wasn't fully solid. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I didn't have to. I knew every line of that body from years of watching him come home late from his own shifts. Dad! I whispered. He raised one hand, palm outward, the way he used to when he wanted me to stop running toward the car as a kid. It was the same gesture, the same angle, the same pause. I remembered Eli's story, the echo wearing his brother's jacket, the mountain pulling old shapes out of memory and setting them on the road. This wasn't my father. It was something that had been watching me long enough to know exactly what I missed. Terror cut through the longing. I threw myself into the cruiser, slammed the door, and shoved the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I dropped the car into drive and stomped on the accelerator. The cruiser leapt forward, straight at the figure. For a heartbeat, I braced for impact, for the horrible crunch of metal, and the nightmare of hitting something that looked so much like my dad. There was nothing. The car passed through him like he was made of fog. I gasped and checked the rearview mirror. He stood in the road behind me, unchanged, watching the cruiser race away. The snow swirled around him, but he didn't move. Then, from everywhere at once, inside the car, outside, in the air itself, I heard his voice. You came back, he whispered. I gripped the wheel so hard my hand hurt. I didn't know if he meant the mountain, the road, or something older, something I didn't have words for. All I knew was that after that night near Quail Mountain, I couldn't pretend any of this was just stress or imagination anymore. Whatever haunted these highways knew me now. It knew my father. And if I didn't uncover what had happened to him out here, I had the sick feeling I already knew what was going to happen to me. I wouldn't just be driving these roads. I'd be part of what walked them. I didn't go back to Quail Mountain for a few days after that night. I still worked my shifts, still wore the uniform, still drove the same roads, but I moved like someone trying not to step on a crack in old ice. I stayed close to town when I could. I answered the simple calls. But no matter how much I tried to pretend things were normal, the echoes stayed with me. I heard my name in the hiss of the cruiser's heater. I saw my father's silhouette in the reflection of dark windows as I passed him. Once, while signing a report, I glanced up and thought I saw him at the end of the hallway in the station. Just one shoulder, the edge of his jacket, the familiar tilt of his head. Sleep didn't help. Every dream was a winter road. I drove alone through snow and darkness, and then another pair of headlights glowed beside mine. There was never a second car, just light. When I woke up, my heart pounded, and I could still hear footsteps in my head, matching my pulse. After the night near Quail Mountain, one thought kept clawing back into my mind. If the thing out there knew my father, then my father must have known it too. Somewhere in some record, there had to be proof, something written down before he left this place. So on my next off-duty afternoon, I went back to the archives. The records room sat behind a heavy door near the end of the station hallway. It always felt colder inside than anywhere else. Metal cabinets lined the walls, drawers labeled with years and badge numbers. I dug through folders until my fingers were dusty. Most of what I saw was ordinary: tickets, warnings, accident reports. Part of me wanted to walk away, to leave the past buried. But another part pushed me deeper into the shelves. My father's name wasn't on any of the newer paperwork. I had to work backward, pulling out older boxes, reading labels. Finally, I found one with his badge number written in fading blue ink on a strip of tape. Inside were loose reports and copied patrol logs. Some pages were folded, creased from being carried around. I recognized his handwriting at once. Sharp and neat. The same print I remember from notes he used to leave on our kitchen counter. I started reading. At first, it was routine winter stuff. Black ice around certain curves. A tree down after a storm. A stranded truck. But as I moved forward through the weeks, the tone of his notes changed. One entry mentioned a false crash by Turquoise Lake. Caller hung up, nothing found but old damage and fresh footprints. Another line talked about a voice calling his name from the tree line, with no visual source. Another described radio interference when approaching last visible footprints on ice. My own memories flickered beside the words. The stalled car near Turquoise Lake, the footprints that stopped in the middle of the frozen lake, the woman's voice drifting through the storm. He had seen the same things. I turned another page. Saw tire tracks on closed service road that should be buried by last storm. Gate still chained. Heard someone whisper, "Come back," directly behind me. Dash cam glitched on review. I swallowed. Another entry. Mirrored tracks on highway. My vehicle the only one reported in the area. Voices increasing. They sound like family. The last few notes were shorter, written like his hand was shaking. Disappearing calls, disappearing people. Something is wrong with this mountain. It knows me. And then on a single sheet with no date, only one line, running across the middle in uneven strokes. It wants me to join the road, to walk with it. I stared at that sentence until my vision blurred. I could almost see him hunched at a desk like this one, pen scratching across the paper, trying to name something that didn't fit any report. It wants me, not us, not them, me. My throat felt tight. I set the page down and leaned back, closing my eyes. For a moment I was a kid again, while people told me my father had been tired and ready for a change. No one had ever said he was afraid. No one had said the mountains had followed him home. The thing out there hadn't picked me at random. It had watched my father first, followed him during winter shifts, mirrored his tracks, called his name in storms and static. It had waited years. And then I showed up with the same last name, the same badge, driving the same roads. I put the papers away the way I'd found them, trying not to leave any sign I'd been there. Closing that box felt like closing a casket for a second time. The hallway outside the records room seemed longer when I left. The sensible thing would have been to ask for a transfer, or at least request a break. Go stay with my mom in another town for a while. But I didn't. That night, I went on patrol anyway. Part of it was duty. Part of it was stubborn pride. The rest was something darker, this need to know. I couldn't shake the idea that if I ran now, I'd be leaving my father behind again. So I drove. The sky was clear, but the air felt heavy, like snow might fall at any second. Stars hung over the ridges, sharp and cold. My headlights carved a tunnel through the darkness, picking out the yellow lines and the edges of packed snow. As I neared the old service road off Highway 91, the strange pressure I'd felt before it turned. The feeling of being tugged by something that wasn't gravity, something that had nothing to do with physics and everything to do with memory. I slowed as I came around the curve, and there they were, tire tracks, fresh and wrong. They cut through the snow up to the chain gate, and then continued beyond it, straight up the closed road. The exact same pattern as the first night, before any of this made sense. I pulled onto the shoulder and killed the engine. For a moment I just sat there, hands on the wheel, heart pounding so loudly it almost drowned out everything else. Marcus. The whisper came from nowhere and everywhere at once. I flinched, twisting to look at the back seat. Empty. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the cruiser. The cold hit me like a slap. The sky stretched wide and clear, but the shadows of the tree line looked too thick, like they were hiding something solid. I walked toward the gate, boots grinding in the packed snow. The tire tracks glowed faintly in my beam. The chain on the gate hung still and untouched, yet the tracks flowed under it as if the metal weren't there. Grief, fear, and some strange, hollow longing crashed inside me. "Dad," I whispered. The air stirred. "Hey, kiddo," a man's voice said. My father's voice, clear as if he stood next to me. Another voice slid under his, softer and higher. "Stay with me," the missing woman breathed. Then a third voice, rougher, with a hint of Eli's drawl. Someone I had never met but recognized from the pain in Eli's eyes when he talked about him. "Don't leave me out here," it said. The voices twisted together, circling me like wind. Behind them, under them, something deeper moved. A sound that wasn't exactly a voice, more like the low rumble of shifting ice. Across the road, the air thickened. Snow lifted in slow whirls, drawn to a single point above the ditch. It gathered and turned, folding on itself until shape took form, tall, thin, and pale, like someone had taken a human outline and carved it out of fog and moonlight. It had no clear face, no eyes I could point to, but I knew it was looking at me. The voices all spoke at once through it. "Walk with us." The sound passed through my coat, through my ribs, settling somewhere behind my heart. For a moment my knees almost buckled. Images burst behind my eyes. My father on an empty winter road. A young woman's footprint stopping in the middle of a lake. Distant figures on ridges that never left tracks. "Walk with us." It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. I stood there in the freezing dark, unable to move, feeling every piece of me pulled in two directions. Part of me wanted to run back to the cruiser, slam the door, and never look at this thing again. The other part wanted to step forward, to find out where those impossible tire tracks led, to understand why my father had written that final line. It wanted me to join the road. Now it wanted me to choose. The figure tilted its head slowly, like it was studying my hesitation. The snow inside its outline flickered and swirled, forming hints of faces that never fully emerged. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw my father's profile. Then the missing woman. Then a man with Eli's eyes. "Walk with us." It said again. The cold pressed closer. My breath fogged the air between us, and for one terrifying second, I almost stepped forward. I almost said yes. And deep down, I knew the next time it came, I might not stop myself. The mountain was done waiting. It was demanding an answer. I don't remember driving away from a thing that called itself a memory. One moment I was standing there on the side of Highway 91, frozen in place as its voices circled me. The next, I was back in my cruiser with the engine running and the heater humming like nothing had happened. I stared at my hands, gripping the wheel, wondering how long I'd been sitting there, how much time had seeped away without my awareness. My breath fogged the glass. My heart wouldn't slow down. I didn't trust myself to move, but I didn't trust myself to stay either. I should have gone home. I should have turned in my badge. I should have walked into the station and told them I needed help. But the voices from the night before kept replaying in my head. My father's voice blending with all the others, whispering things I wasn't strong enough to remove from memory. "Walk with us." I felt like I had one chance left. One night to stop whatever was pulling me off these roads before it pulled me somewhere I could never return from. And deep down, I knew it wouldn't wait until morning. The storms always came at night. So when the sky began to darken and the first heavy flakes started falling again, I started driving. I didn't radio dispatch. I didn't check in. I just followed the stretch of Highway 91 as it curved through the forest and up the ridges, deeper into the places where the echoes lived. The storm grew fast. Within minutes, the road vanished under spinning white. My headlights hit a wall of snow, so thick it looked solid. Wipers squealed across the windshield. Wind shoved the cruiser sideways. But still I drove, foot steady on the pedal, eyes fixed on the faint lines of the road I'd memorized years ago. By the time I reached the long straightaway near the base of the mountain, visibility had dropped to nearly nothing. Snow whipped across the asphalt in chaotic sheets. The world outside the cruiser was only motion and white, shifting, twisting, swallowing everything. And then the voices started, soft at first, murmuring in the static of the radio, in the hiss of the vents, even the thud of my tires on the frozen road. Marcus, come back. Not alone. My father's voice thread between them, clearer than the others, quiet but steady. Pull over. I didn't want to. Every part of me screamed to keep going, to stay inside the car where the heater fought back the cold. But my hands turned the wheel anyway, like they remembered something my mind wasn't ready to admit. I eased the cruiser onto the shoulder and let the engine run. Snow gathered immediately on the windshield, clinging in a thick layer. The storm swallowed all sound except the wind and the faint, fading crackle of the radio. For a long moment, I just sat there, breathing hard, wondering if I had enough strength left to open the door. The knocking came next. 3 sharp taps on the driver's side window, just like before. But this time, I didn't jump. I didn't look for footprints. The fear was still there, sharp and deep, but something else had replaced the panic. A tired kind of acceptance. A final understanding. I reached for the door handle and stepped out into the storm. The wind ripped the breath from my lungs. Snow stung my face. The world was nothing but white in motion, swirling and twisting like it was alive. I took a step away from the cruiser, and the darkness hidden inside the storm shifted. The shape appeared slowly, pulled from the drifting snow. It rose like a figure waking from sleep, long, pale, featureless. A human outline, but blurred and shifting, its edges constantly dissolving and reforming as the storm fed into it. The voices swelled inside it, hundreds layered over hundreds. Frozen travelers, lost hikers, miners trapped in collapsed tunnels, people who wandered off the road and never returned. And threaded through them all, my father. The storm parted around the shape, revealing faint images behind it, like scenes projected on the moving snow. I saw a group of miners with frostbitten faces, stumbling through the dark. A woman lying half buried in a drift, hand reaching upward. A man crying out as he vanished into a curtain of white. Then the images grew clearer, closer. My father stood on a winter road. The same uniform, the same posture, the same tired slump in his shoulders. He lifted a gloved hand toward me. Come with us. The voices said as one. Walk with us. The cold pressed into me, seeping through my coat, sinking into my bones. My legs felt weak, like the snow wanted to swallow me where I stood. Part of me wanted to let it. Part of me wanted to step forward, to take my father's hand, to understand everything he'd faced here by sharing the same fate. For a moment, I felt myself fading. My vision dimmed at the edges. The wind sounded distant, like I was sinking underwater. I felt weightless, like my body didn't matter anymore. But then something inside me cracked, an old memory rising from a place untouched by the mountain. I saw my father sitting at our kitchen table when I was a kid, telling me that the job meant protecting people, not following the darkness. I remember the warmth in his voice, the pride, the way he looked at me like he hoped I'd live a life he never got the chance to. And I realized something hard and painful. Whatever stood in front of me wasn't my father. It was only what the mountain had stolen from him. I stepped backward, one slow foot at a time. The cold thickened around me, the voices sharpening into something angry, something hungry. No, I said, though my voice shook. Not tonight. Not me. The shape twisted, its outline stretching like it was reaching for me. A dozen voices shouted through the wind. Come back. Stay. Walk. My father's voice rose above them, a desperate echo. Kiddo. But I turned and stumbled toward the cruiser, feeling strength return in small, painful bursts. The snow fought me, dragging at my legs, but I pushed through it. The cold clawed at my back. For a terrible moment, I thought I felt fingers brush my shoulder. I yanked open the car door, threw myself inside, and slammed it shut. My hands shook as I reached for the ignition. The windshield was a solid sheet of white. The engine roared to life. I floored it. The cruiser lurched forward, tires spinning before they caught traction. I shot back onto the highway, the storm swallowing everything behind me. For a moment, I didn't breathe. Then the outline appeared in my rearview mirror. The tall, shapeless figure stood in the center of the road, framed by snow and darkness. It didn't move. It didn't follow. It simply watched as the distance between us grew with every passing second. Slowly, as the storm thickened again, it dissolved into drifting flakes. I drove until the storm broke, until the sky opened into a flat gray morning. My hands didn't stop shaking until I reached the outskirts of town. I survived that night, but something in me stayed on that road. Even now, I still see things when the snow falls hard. In the reflection of my side mirror, I sometimes catch the shape of a man walking beside the cruiser, just out of step with me. Tall, familiar, reaching. I end this now with the same warning I wish someone had given my father. If you ever drive Highway 91 in winter and hear someone calling your name, don't look, don't answer. The mountains remember, even if we try to forget.